It's always better if you try to do something, fail, and then somebody gives you the answer as opposed to somebody gives you the answer. Learning is a journey, not a destination.
Welcome to the Coursera podcast, where we have conversations with renowned experts and industry leaders to explore global trends impacting the future of education and work. I'm your host, Arunav Sinha, Vice President of Global Communications at Coursera. Over the last decade, MOOCs, massive open online courses, have gone from bold experiment to a transformative force in global education. How did we get here? And what's next as AI and new technologies continue to reshape the way we learn? We will dig into all that today. Joining us is Dhawal Shah, the founder and CEO of Class Central, a platform millions of learners use to find and review online courses. Dhawal has been following the online learning space since its very beginning and has got some incredible insights on how it has evolved, where it is going, and what they mean for learners everywhere. Dhawal, welcome to the Coursera podcast. We are excited to have you.
Thank you, Arno. It's great to be here. It's almost been 12 years since someone from Coursera interviewed me, and I didn't get the job. Great to be back here again.
Yeah, this is even better. You've been deeply involved in the online learning space since the very beginning. In fact, I came to this field in 2016 and you were one of the first people I met. And I was completely startled by how you've cataloged the history, how much of insights you have. You've really seen some of the founders as starting these online ventures, which have gone on to become a platform for the world in many ways. Can you share how your journey with online education started and what inspired you to launch Class Central?
Class Central was a side project. So I had just graduated from my master's in computer science from Georgia Tech, and I couldn't clear technical interviews in Silicon Valley. So I eventually found a job in Dallas, and I was trying to look at online resources to learn about, data structures, algorithms. Like the platforms today are much more evolved, but back then there weren't that many resources, so that many structured resources. So right around that time, like Stanford, at that time we didn't know about Coursera, Udacity, or edX. Stanford free courses. It was like mid 2011 or something. There was like introduction to artificial intelligence, and there were like database and machine learning from Andrew Ng, like the Coursera co-founder. So these courses, they just launched in a very ad hoc, a simple website, simple announcement. And I was taking one of them. And while I was taking this course, more and more courses were being popping up. And over Thanksgiving weekend, I was like, oh, I need to just create a simple GitHub project, make a simple list of all the courses with start dates and end dates. So I can just sort it by start date and know which ones I'm taking when. At that time, they were very close to university courses put online, like structure wise, semester patterns, hard deadlines. So the scheduling was a lot more important. So yeah, just I happened to sort of be at the right place, right time. I launched it over like a comment in Hacker News. And if people remember the history, 2012 was the year of the MOOC. So I just happened to be that person who, from a course perspective and from industry perspective, I would like, right, hey, these many courses are launched. This is how much enrollments they have. Like Google Plus was popping up. So now I post on LinkedIn, but back then I was posting on Google Plus. It had more formatting options, it had more ways to do things. And like it just got sort of, I just happened to be right place at the right time. I wasn't thinking it of as a business. I was just having fun exploring social media. Everything was new back then. I was doing those courses. I, in fact, interviewed at both Coursera and Udacity. I didn't get a job there, but eventually I did a Stanford course from Tim Garden on Coursera, data structures and algorithms, and that helped me get my first job in Silicon Valley. Once you're in Silicon Valley, there are no side projects. You're a CEO. So eventually I started looking for opportunities to work on it full time. And I eventually got into an incubator, and finally, that's when end of 2013 is when I quit my job and have been working on Class Central since then.
It was very clear, Dhawal, that God had other plans for you, and you turned that setback into an opportunity, which has now become a resource for people around the world. So you've done an incredible job with what you've created. But back in early 2010 and 12, which you're talking about that window, online courses were seen as revolutionary in many ways, and you became beneficiary of that as well. What was it like though in those early days, and what do you think drove that initial popularity, despite the fact that you mentioned that initially the courses had hard deadlines, hard cohorts, and all of that, and yet it became so popular.
Yeah, so I'll compare like same Rough Garden course was available on Stanford Engineering everywhere or something like that. But the video was recorded in class. So that era was like we're just transitioning from OCW.
And for our audience, OCW means open courseware.
OCW is not made for online. It's in class recorded, like just put online. And they're pretty useful, but you might not have access to assignment resources and other things. It didn't feel like you were taking the course, but when as soon as the Coursera's, Udacity's edX, it felt like you are getting access to a university course and you're getting access to the same course that somebody offline gets, can do the assignments. There's grading, homeworks. There's a huge community. So I think it's the allure of, hey, you can take a course online from Stanford. You can take a course online from MIT or like all these great universities. And obviously, this was a bit of a hype era. The media also started promoting it, and there's like so much coverage in 2012 about how university is going to disrupt. There was like fewer courses. So they got a lot of enrollments, but there was also kind of a marketing media environment that helped these companies these courses to much significantly bigger audience that they would have organically. So, and I think people were just starving for the right resource, right knowledge, right structure. And back then there was like another aspect of it, like the courses were made while the course was going on, like episode one was going on, and for the first lecture, first week was going on, and they were shooting the second week. So there's like a feedback loop that you could say something and it kind of made it to the next videos, or some of the professors were in the forum. There was this early energy in there and a lot of early adopters. Even if they knew the topic, they were like, hey, even if you knew like pretty good at AI or pretty good at those topics, you still want to be able to be part of that community. So I think that's helped create this sort of change from OCWs to like courses that are made for online audience. I think that was the sort of the big difference.
Yeah, and I think it was also the allure, and tell me if I'm wrong, but also the allure of access to some of the most renowned professors from some of the best university. Now, suddenly somebody in India or Africa or Latin America has access to Andrew Ng's course, which was sort of iconic in many ways.
Yeah, aspiration, I think aspiration played a huge role. When I applied to come to US to study, I didn't even apply to Stanford, Harvard, and MIT. I just self-selected myself out, right? It's just most people don't even apply because you're not going to get in. And now you're getting from the same instructors who are putting their energies online and getting access to similar assignments. I think there was a TED talk by Daphne Kohler back then where she showed like actually activity went up on the weekend. She showed a graph because activity went up on the weekend because we're all like on the forums and all like doing the assignments, doing the homeworks, like because it had a hard deadline. Or sometimes it's like a softer deadline. It's like, yeah, you can submit now, but if you can submit a bit later, you'll get like some cutoff. But there was always a hard deadline. So that FOMO made all of us come on the forums, and the forums had a lot of energy there.
Got it. And then you also saw that suddenly the popularity led to creation of certain platforms, certain companies, Coursera, edX, Udemy, all sort of came around the same time frame. But they all carved out their unique paths in online learning, each shaping the space in different ways, and they took different approaches in somewhat. What have been the most pivotal moments in their evolution, and what stands out as the most impactful for learners?
Yeah, I think they were all trying to figure out. They all had like a seed of this is what people want, or some people want, like as opposed to like this is what the world wants. Like they always had that seed and they had to do a lot of experimentation to sort of get what they are. For example, I remember Coursera, like the first specialization that Coursera launched. I think it was from Johns Hopkins about data science or something. And I think for them, that was like the pivotal moment in monetization, where that's when they started monetizing. So I think there were a lot of little experiments. Like the core model was in a way validated from a user perspective, but there's the packaging of how to get to the learner, like how to monetize and how what's important to the learner. I think there's a lot of learning from video recording and like these universities or professors who are recording themselves, they had to get their sort of skills up. I remember this moment at Coursera conference in UC Irvine or someplace, which me and one of my colleagues, we actually interviewed 10 plus professors who taught on Coursera over like 2 days, and we published some of those posts on the blogs. And it was very interesting to hear. As soon as they came in, Coursera obviously had a professional videographer. So as soon as some of them came in, they started asking questions about about the camera and about certain aspects of recording. So you could see a lot of these early adopters. Barbara Oakley's famous, right? She built her studio in her. So they all become sort of like media, semi-media expertise. They had to develop, the early adopters had. They didn't have the universities as much of resources in the early years, so they had to develop it themselves. So it was very interesting to see them ask about those questions about media and recording from the Coursera's experts. So you could tell they were very passionate about the topic and the domain and teaching online, and they really cared about like the experience. So those kinds of experiences what shaped the product, and little by little, and monetization obviously was important too. It was pretty much free for the first year, 2 years or something, and so you have to be sustainable. So that was a lot of little experiments I saw Coursera do, Udacity do, edX do, and I think that you all learn from each other. So you come to a point where, in terms of monetization wise, there's parity in how you monetize, what you charge, and what the scale models, which have like thousands, hundreds or thousands of courses charge, versus what some smaller platforms which have dozens of courses charge. So there's much more variation, and now you see sort of the variation sort of collapse as like people have figured out the right pricing for the right product to a certain extent.
Yeah, and also the fact that the first versions were often these courses which were shot in the class, professors instructing to the students in classroom, and that were put online with some packaging. And later, some of the instructors who understood that, if we have to succeed in this, we have to have an online first mindset and have some level of production in order to succeed and resonate with the audience.
And they had to develop their own skills, because I don't think the universities had that capability back then. So they had to, like Barbara Oakley building a studio in her basement for like $5,000, getting her husband to record the videos, getting her family involved to do other aspects, similar to other professors who sort of bought their own cameras, tried to do their own thing. And eventually, universities kind of, as it got bigger, I think more universities took over control of centralizing some of these aspects and giving the resources to professors, because not everybody would want to learn about videography to teach online. So I think taking care of those aspects and letting the professors or instructors focus on what they do best, like the domain expertise, and having building like learning experts and other things around them. So that's like allows you to do more courses.
As much as it is a success of educators from an institution perspective, it is also a success of individuals. And a big part of the success of online movement lies on the shoulders of people like Barb Oakley and Laurie Santos and Dr. Chuck and all of them who brought their unique personality and connected with a worldwide audience and developed a fan following which was kind of unprecedented for professors.
Yeah, especially back then, I remember like a lot of professors would say, because the courses were small, the people were a lot, they would get recognized in real life, which is pretty unique, right? Like for professors.
That's right. I want to change a gear and move along on the timeline a little bit. So, the widespread adoption of online learning created the opportunity to make education accessible to everyone. That we kind of established in our prelude. But following universities, even leading companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, IBM launched courses and became educators, which was another very pivotal point in the evolution of online learning. And seeing them, universities also became a lot more agile and responsive to the demand of what learners are looking for and started creating content at a much faster rate. For example, last year, universities launched as many as 650 courses on Coursera, which is unprecedented in many ways. And a lot of them are in these high demand areas like Gen AI, leadership, creativity, resilience, change management, all of that.
I think with the companies aspect, I think there were like a few failed attempts at the beginning to get companies involved. I think Udacity had the Google partnerships, had very early on tried that, but maybe the exact packaging and branding was what I think Coursera cracked. Is like tried the framing as professional certificates and career certificates, and but I've seen those experiments over the years. Udacity also launched with AT&T like the Georgia Tech Masters online, but it didn't work for Udacity and they finally split off. So I think it's something that again took like more than a half a decade or later to for Coursera to read. At a high level you look like it's the same, but at some point you had to figure out exact packaging, exact product, and so that was very interesting to sort of see like that cycle. People probably forgot that this was a failed experiment and new people came in and they had more energy and different ideas and they were not like influenced by the past experiences. And you were able to sort of crack that Coursera, IBM, yeah, Meta and all these certificates and getting them to probably there's a lot of logistics behind the scenes of putting a logo is easy, getting to create to them. And maybe you had more capacity now than 6, 7 years ago to execute on that. So I think probably number of factors had to come into play before companies could really launch courses that can be at scale. I think it's always also interesting to see, like, I always felt like universities can teach you more conceptual things, like the ideas behind data science of as opposed to the specific tool. So trying to design UX, UI, like trying more around the concepts and the framework of thinking, while external non-university creators can be more specific to teaching you the tools to do it. So trying to see how that space evolves, how they, kind of figure out what's best for, what can you teach best as opposed to trying to teach everything.
If you look back in retrospect, do you think online learning delivered on this original promise of what it stood for? And are there still barriers to overcome?
I think those sort of some of the barriers, yeah, that still exist. I think motivation is still a problem. I think content exists, the certification exists. I think the motivation of doing something. Imagine if I want to learn Rust programming, which I want to. Sure, I can find a lot of guides, tutorials, but to really learn it, I need to spend like 100 plus, 50 to 100 plus hours. And most of them should not be passive of watching a video or like just doing alongside. I had to put my own energy and projects and all that. So I think that's something it's still difficult to crack. And like the way the motivation problem is solved is through like more structure, more instruction, mentorship. But then suddenly the price jumps up, like suddenly a human kind of is semi-involved. Suddenly the cost of the programs, and that makes it inaccessible. So you have this scale of like completion rate. Completion rate is low, but actually that's low because more people are getting into it. But as soon as you increase the completion rate, but the actual people getting out of the program is significantly lower. So you have created problems. So I never liked the argument around completion rate itself. There are many books that all of us buy and never read. That doesn't make it's not the book's fault in some case, it's just how we are structured, our lives are structured in the current era. So I think that's still like a challenge of how do you get people to take advantage of the resources that already exist. Sort of like Class Central's sort of mission goal is to make online education work for everyone, which I don't know how to do it, but that's sort of the high level goal of here's a course that if you do it really well, you will benefit. But sometimes you end up changing the goal from learning to like earning a certificate. You just breeze through the course, do bare minimum to get a certificate. So then you do not get the learning that you desire, if especially if in many cases the lower the cost, the less rigorous the quizzes and the assignments are. You're not getting human grading, you're not getting unstructured assignments. So you have to put in that extra effort. Usually I know I do more online courses when I'm less happy. When I'm happy, I cannot like I feel like I don't want to do like tough work of actually getting through the material and really like making sure I soak it in as opposed to just watching just another YouTube or a Netflix or like you just take notes. Look up the terms. So I think it's like fitness, right? You can give them people a whole gym, but that doesn't mean they'll go in and use it regularly. So I think the same problem that exists in fitness industry.
And our CEO often says, and I think he took it from Julia Stiglitz, who founded another tech company, is I want to and I can. And while online learning solves a big part of I can problem, I want is still a lot of AI interventions, the value of credentials, all that motivates people to I want to. But learning is often a hard process. And hopefully, with the innovations that we are introducing, that will make it a much more pleasant experience so that you can do these courses when you're actually happy and not sad.
Yeah, like it's online learning is one of the few things where you pay money and the problem isn't solved. The problem just starts after you pay money. So I never like the comparison to YouTube, TikTok, Netflix. You should make it engaging, but it's not like just because it has videos, it's not a similar. We ask for different things from different platforms. We're not look we one platform we're looking to escape. The other platform we take it back into a real world. So those two parallels don't really apply.
That's true. And now, with the advent of AI, especially Gen AI, it was already playing a big role in online learning in many ways because some of the founders of online platforms like Coursera and Udacity, they themselves were AI practitioners also in many ways. Especially when it comes to scaling the content, what role do you see AI can play? Means you recently in your own LinkedIn post said that the striking enrollment trends in 2024 where courses like Google's AI Essential drawing huge numbers on Coursera, and clearly all companies will start deploying it to generate content faster. But what are the guardrails that you need to keep in mind, and what are the opportunities do you see with AI in that process?
I think AI generally, I personally feel AI should be invisible. Like if you're using AI like to create content and all that, that's fine. But I think if you still need to be like, why you, right? What is your expertise in using that AI to help me learn, right? So my worry is people will focus too much on scale, trying to scale too quickly and put in a lot of generic audio, video, PowerPoint slides with video over it. And so I think, again, motivation is a big factor for learning, right? So seeing a human professor who's an expert in the field like connects you with the content. So I think somehow from a learner who's sitting at home in an empty room or like a library, how do I connect with the content? And I feel like that's where the university brand or the individual people who are on the cameras, the quirkiness of Barbara Oakley and Dr. Chuck, feel like we are in the same room with them. They somehow bring us into their content and bring it into their courses and create an experience around it. So I think like Dr. Chuck even published something on his LinkedIn saying like, hey, he's going back to his courses not using AI, is on-campus courses. And, like I'm rephrasing what he said, but I think I feel like there's the same challenge with what we saw with MOOCs is like those who can will do really well, but those who are not able to leverage that technology as an individual, the gap might even further increase. And that was the early concern with MOOCs also, when sort of yeah, anybody can learn, but then you look at the data, only people with degrees were the ones who were finishing it. So again, that's not fault of the medium or the platform, but that's sort of the reality of what would happen. And I think Gen AI might also be in a way a similar process. But that's why I like having courses on how to use AI at this point are getting a lot more enrollments because that's sort of like the first. It's like similar learning how to learn is like you should do learning how to learn first so that you can know how to learn, learning how to learn from Barbara Oakley. And kind of it became that horizontal layer of all the courses, right? It's something we used to recommend in our news, like sign up, hey, start with one of these courses so that you know how to learn online and you know how to fail and get back again. And I think the way Barb explains with the scientific sort of reasoning, you feel like, okay, I didn't understand it now, it's okay. So I think the same with Gen AI, like explaining how people to use. In the end, it's like you have to ask of it. You can't just sit there and wait for it to tell you. Like you have to ask it the right questions, which is probably like a skill that helps outside of anywhere else. So I think that's like one of those things are getting people to ask questions and not passively consume content. And it's always better if you try to do something, fail, and then somebody gives you the answer as opposed to somebody gives you the answer. So if you search directly, try to go to the answer, then you're not learning.
Andrew Ng often says you should be minimally helpful as an instructor, which is just about where you can make the next step, but without really helping you find a solution.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be very critical to online learning.
That's one of the first things I learned at Georgia Tech was the content is at one level and the quizzes and the assignments are at a completely different level. And I was not used to that academic system in India where it's like really one-to-one mapping. So like you would go to a computer science class and you would have programming assignments and they would not teach you programming. But once you get over the barrier and you're like, oh wow, you feel confident, like I can solve any problem. Learning is a journey, not a destination, right?
That's right. You raised a good point about how Gen AI can further create a gap. And in fact, some of it is what we are seeing in terms of gender gap. We have more and more men enrolling in Gen AI courses compared to women. So we are clearly, compared to our traditional gender mix on the platform, it is more skewed towards men when it comes to Gen AI content. Now, in March, we are actually releasing a full report on where we have sort of hypothesized and done some experiments to understand why those things are happening and what are steps we as a company, other institutions, employers, governments, all of them can take to mitigate this gap, to reduce this gap. So stay tuned. That'll be coming March. So that'll be a fantastic resource for the community at large. I want to move forward, and you've seen a lot of past. and you've seen the evolution of AI driven tools as well. You talk a little bit about the risk, but what are the ways in which technology can redefine the learning experience in next 5 to 10 years? What are things that are kind of striking in your mind in terms of possibilities?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is being able to ask someone. There's a technique called rubber duck coding or rubber duck debugging or something where you just say out the problem to a rubber duck and sometimes the solution pops to you. So even if AI isn't giving you the answers, just being able to ask someone who gives somewhat an answer gives you some hope of moving forward because I think when you're learning online, I think you just immediately blocked. If you don't know something, you're immediately blocked. You have no one to call, no friends to. So I think there is this wall that, learning is always overcoming these walls when you're learning these topics, new ideas, concepts. So I think that's where I find it at a personal level the most useful is all these little. Yeah, there's big things it can do, but I think all these little things are the ones to me that matter most at a personal level than the big things. Just like if LinkedIn post, I can just get it grammar verified. I don't have to ask someone else. There's a thought or idea that I need to sort of verbalize. I can ask it. Before I had my colleagues do it, and they would spend a lot of time editing my articles. So I think in that sense, we'll find a lot of places where we use it at the right amount for us. I think it's more powerful in that as I don't see it as like, oh, we'll change everything. I still believe that if I hadn't gone through the journey of writing articles on my own for almost a decade, I don't think my AI would have been useful for me. I think it enhances the skills I have, but I don't know. There's certain things like, yeah, I need an Excel formula or little things. I think that's very extremely useful. But I think that's for me, the primary purpose is just like furthering the stuff I already know and already can write. I used to take months to write an article. Now I take days, and some of it is just happened through practice. But if I try to do something that I've never done before, like I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's, I don't have no opinion. I have to just take it as it is. So I think that's where I feel like it will be like little by little in different aspects of our life. We'll use it, and that's where I think it will have like a cumulative impact as opposed to like one big change. Like how the iPhone was, or like the phones in general, how the internet in general. I think it's like little by little where it cumulatively adds up.
How do you think about innovations like Coursera Coach? Have you had a chance to play, especially for this notion that you mentioned that if you're blocked, you don't have anybody to call? But now something like a coach available to help you during that process. Have you had a chance to experience that?
Not directly. I have the subscriptions of all Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT. So yeah, I think I have not directly used it, but I think that's one of those things where it's up to the learner, right, to ask a question, like right question. And it's very easy to ask the question, get the answer, but the answer itself is not, it might still get you blocked because you just got the answer, but not the thinking behind the answer or something. So it's still up to the learner to ask the right question and digest it. And if you do it for the sake of learning, or you're doing like the sake of like just finishing the assignment or the quiz. So yeah, I think those are very helpful, but it's still a tool and it depends on the learner's motivations and attitude on how to use it effectively.
Yeah, in fact, some of those things we have carefully kept in mind while developing Coach. So, one is it is grounded in the content of that course. So, it is not like it going around and finding answer for you. Number two, it will not give you the answer right away. So, people cannot just find the answer and answer the quiz. But obviously, this is a space which is rapidly moving and we have to keep iterating. You have explored many courses through Class Central and you've seen thousands of them. You might have done hundreds of them as well. Have you taken a recent course that you highly recommend, along with some of your all time favorites like Bob Oakley's Learning How to Learn or Stanford Algorithms Design Analysis?
I think recently I haven't done much like full courses. Like I usually sort of go and do what I want and like not really finished right from scratch. I mean, the one I did recently the most was offline, going to Dianza College and like doing Japanese 101. So I think that's also was an interesting experience of, hey, like going back to the textbook, learning from the textbook, but also using Gen AI to like, hey, I know three languages. Can you this concept I am not understanding in Japanese. Can you explain the same concept, how it applies in Hindi, how it applies in English? So I'm like, I think that's something interesting to me is like how do you combine all of these into like something that sort of works for you. For some topics, I just want to be online. I can just take absorb from the lectures and the videos. But for some topics, maybe I need to just open a book, write down the Japanese characters to practice hiragana, katakana. So I think it depends on the topic and the person on what some things are harder for you, some things are easier. So harder stuff you need to figure out like a different way of learning as opposed to because I tried all the language learning apps, the podcasts and all that. Like I could never break through the wall. But the textbook finally helped me and the lectures in person. I think online can be too efficient. The videos can have too many concepts in one video, too many, it's like too compressed, too well defined. So sometimes even when the professor is rambling in a class, I think that's sometimes good because you get time to absorb the content. Sure, if you're like someone who's like very good at learning and like that's inefficient, but maybe inefficiency in a way is like a good thing. I don't know. I'm just grappling with that concept of, sometimes you zone out, but you come back in, and because the instructor is not going that fast, yeah, you can get back into it. But sometimes, like a 5-10 minute video of deep concepts, and you're like, this is tiring me out because it's a lot of information in a short amount of time.
So you've been a consumer of courses. You write a lot, obviously, for Class Central and other places. But if you could create a course on any topic with no limits, anything, what would it cover and who would you like to teach it?
Like maybe like something like how to find a course, how to choose a course for right for you. Yeah, I think those that might be my expertise. It's like I think failing is important. I also fail a lot during courses, so telling them that it's okay to not complete a course, it's okay to not. People have like this opinion of like you need to know before moving ahead. Some people need to know before you're moving ahead. Some people are like, just let me do the whole thing, even if I don't understand. So I think giving those sort of mental model. Like, and the first step is like, I'll just tell him, go to do Barbara Oakley's course, do learning how to learn, because sometimes you're intuited by information from people who are very successful, good at learning. And I think they can do, I have not done hundreds of courses. I've probably done like 20, 25 courses, and but that's over a decade. So, like it's still hard for me to do a new course and to take it from something from zero to something that's like tangible. So I think maybe that's where I could give people a mental model of like allowing them to fail and allowing them to find their rhythm of taking a course.
That might be the most profound insight people can take away. Means give yourself the permission to try different things, have a flexible mental model, and permission to fail, and permission to celebrate when you succeed. So it's totally okay because it's online, it's low cost, and learning is as you rightly mentioned, is a journey. It's not a destination. So thank you very much, Dhawal. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for sharing your story and your incredible insights on the evolution of online learning.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me.
To our listeners, if you're curious about online courses, check out classcentral.com. It's an amazing resource for discovering the next learning adventure. And don't forget to explore Coursera.org for a wide range of programs to help you upskill and prepare for the next career move. If you enjoyed this episode of the Coursera podcast, please rate, review, and share. Until next time, I'm Arunav Sinha. Thank you for tuning in.